So is Georgia really Georgia? Are they Georgia? Are they back? Is this the team? Is Oregon, or who are they? They need to be better than they were at Camp Randall Stadium, or is it just a matter of it's November, it's on the road, it's at a difficult place to play, and ugly wins are pretty wins because any win you can get in a championship season needs to be savored and cherished. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here for our post-game show. We take your calls for the next hour plus, depending on your participation and contribution and so forth. But I'll be here for an hour or maybe 3 or maybe 5 or maybe 7. We could take this all night, depending on your desire. So we will go to the calls as soon as we run down the scores in progress. And of course, we're talking all of college football. I will not go into any great soliloquy in terms of who the winners and losers were today. I think it was pretty obvious, but want to hear from you, of course. Let's go to the scores in progress. There shouldn't be many. So what we've got is Washington State, who has been on the periphery of the college football playoff discussion at 7-1. Of course, they lost by 3 touchdowns to Boise State. Are any of us really taking them seriously? No. And this is further evidence right there. Washington State should not be in a college football playoff discussion in any way, shape, or form. They've got a 7-1, now 8-1 record. But are losing to New Mexico. They are losing to New Mexico. Once again, New Mexico is defeating Washington State 31-28. I think that in and of itself, regardless of what happens in the final 3.5 minutes of play, will be enough to oust them out of my own top 25. That actually makes sense. Washington State, see you. Bye. Okay, Kansas and BYU. BYU leads 13-10. BYU, of course, at this point, last Saturday night when we joined you, was pulling off a miracle against Utah in which they were down to their final play. They were being ambushed. They were back at their own goal line. They had to take it like 75 yards to have any chance to do anything, down by 2 points. And again, the offense could do nothing. They were bailed out by a pass interference call. And lo and behold, just momentum swung out of nowhere. And of course, they pulled out that game in the Holy War, and they are in a tussle again tonight against a Kansas team that's playing a little bit better in recent weeks, but still 3-6, 2-4 in the Big 12 is pretty darn bad. And so BYU leading 13-10 over Kansas. That's the game that really matters as of right now out of only 2 being played. So let's go to the call-in lines. We got our guy to Real MVP leading off the show tonight. Welcome into the Voice of College Football.
Always a pleasure to be, Mark. How you doing this evening / early morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, Mark, there was a few teams that didn't play or won today their games, but they actually lost in the broader scope of college football. And the first team I want to talk about is Notre Dame. Listen, I know they won against Virginia, but after some other results today, I think there's a legitimate case they should be moved down in the rankings. Louisville lost to Stanford.
Yeah, they did.
Navy got blasted by Tulane. What is Notre Dame's second best win right now? Could somebody please explain this to me in words I can understand?
Yeah, and I had a conversation the other night on our Notre Dame live show in which I had droves of Notre Dame fans just ready to burn me at the stake for in any way denigrating Notre Dame's fine resume as a college football playoff team.
Yeah, their strength of schedule, I believe, was 73 entering today. It should significantly drop after today. Like, significantly drop. You beat a terrible, hapless Virginia team, whoop-de-doo. They play a bunch of nobodies. They play a glorified group of 5 schedule with some ACC mixed in there. They're just not I don't know how to describe this to people, but if everyone wants the SEC to go to 9 conference games. You know what you do? You tell Notre Dame, kick rocks, you're not in the playoffs because you lost to Northern Illinois. That's what you do. We should stop looking at what your record is and, oh my gosh, you only got 1 loss. Everybody you beat is terrible, and you can't even beat them convincingly like Indiana has done.
They beat Texas A&M.
Yeah,
be
cool.
fair. But you said everybody.
Okay, almost everybody.
Okay. And Louisville's not awful. I know they lost to Stanford, but
they're 8-4 at best.
Yeah, they're going to be 8-4. I don't know who they play Pitt and Kentucky. Yes, they're 6-4. And yes, I am not in any way saying Louisville is some great team and nobody should lose to Stanford. Nobody should lose to Stanford. Stanford is horrible. In Louisville, somehow I read the box score. I looked at the game recap. I did not see one play. I did not even consider that should be a game. They were a 21-point favorite, but they somehow lost to Stanford, which is basically like losing to a really good high school football team these days. So I can't explain that. And it calls into question, like, if you're a really, really good football team, if you're a legitimate football team, you could play a bad game, sleepwalk, and still beat Stanford by 2 to 3 touchdowns.
Correct. Few plays I'll mention in that game, Mark, and I'll just mention these are quote-unquote plays because they're not in the box score, I don't believe. There was an unnecessary roughness to take Stanford from their own 45-yard line to the other 45. And then on the field goal attempt that was 57 yards, Louisville got offsides and made it a 52-yarder. So Louisville gave up literally 20 free yardage of plays in the final 1 second of the game to lose the game. So that's how they lost the game. They completely collapsed and completely choked down the stretch.
And you shouldn't even be in a game with Stanford. They're just a horrible football team. So you're right, Notre Dame's resume, although guess who also factors into that Louisville game? Stanford. Notre Dame beat Stanford.
I mean, whoop-de-doo. They beat Stanford.
Well,
I know it should pull out theoretically, but it's not.
Theoretically, you're knocking Notre Dame for a loss taken on their resume, but the loss was taken to another team that they won.
Right, but all I'm saying is if we're having the playoffs expanded to 12 teams, I want 12 teams that I believe can at least compete for a national championship game, and Notre Dame cannot compete. I've seen it over and over again with their schedule. Anyway, I don't want to hype about an irrelevant team for too long, Mark, because
I'm actually going to jump back on your side real quick because I'm just trying to be fair here and try to tackle all sides. The counter argument to that is that even though Notre Dame played both teams and therefore one was going to win and one was going to lose, when the better team, the perceived better team, and I think regardless of what happened in this game, Louisville is certainly the better team than Stanford, when that one loses, then it just shows that it still weights down the level of play and the quality of the resume because it diminishes the top end of the resume severely. And who cares about the bottom of this, the resume being, instead of horrific, being just deplorable or whatever you want to phrase it.
No, it's still horrific when you play Purdue and FSU in the same season. It's still horrific. You can't escape it. But Mark, another team who lost today, which is amazing because they didn't even play today, was Michigan. And the reason Michigan lost was because Kirk Nitty got extended at Indiana. And that was going to be their savior, Mark. So is Michigan just completely doomed now?
Well, they're doomed because they're going to bring back Sharon Moore. And regardless of what happens with Kurt Cignetti, they were going to do that anyway. From what I understand, they're going to do that anyway. I would not have judged. See, most people would take the tact, I think, that you would give more grace to Sharon Moore since he's a first-year head coach rather than if they would have gone out and gotten an experienced, qualified head coach, and then he would have disappointed with what is going to be a 6-6 season most likely. But I see it the other way. If they would have brought in Matt Campbell, PJ Fleck, whomever, and they would have had a disappointing year, I would look past that as being first-year transition. I'm hiring a guy that I know that is a qualified individual. In this situation, they have a national championship team, or they have a semblance of a national championship team coming back. They have a national championship, somewhat of a national championship defense coming back. Sharon Moore has taken this and he has botched it. He should be able to go 9-3 with this football team. And therefore, he is just basically confirmed that he's not ready to lead a big time college football program. There might be a time in the future that he is, but for right now, I don't know why Michigan would be the training ground for a head coach in the Power Five.
I don't know either, Mark, but I tell you what, in a few weeks, you and David Greenshield and all the rest of you, 3 years of frustration and pent-up anger, I feel like, is going to be released on the football field, and there's just going to be a smattering of the color blue in
It
Columbus.
appears so. I never count that game as a win until the final second goes off the clock.
This has been the most lopsided I've seen that game in a while. Like, I see no path for Michigan. Oh, if you just took away the jerseys and just said Team A is playing Team B, and you just give the results, I see no path for Team B to beat Team A based on what we've seen through the course of the season.
Well, I will say that the 2 games prior to Michigan cheating for 3 years, those were complete annihilations, and those Michigan teams were ranked in the top 10 to 15 in the country, and Ohio State still blew them out by 30 points.
Right, and this Michigan team's ranked what? Top 75, top 60, something like that. I mean, they're not a good football team at all. They're just a mid to below average football team. But Mark, another team I would like to ask you about, another coach specifically that may be entering the hot seat zone, is Brian Kelly. 3 straight losses now, complete failure. It seems like this season, the season before, wasted Jaden Daniels' talent completely with an atrocious defense. How much patience is there in LSU?
Well, there's always money to consider, so that's part of it. But if we're talking strictly about his job performance, in my opinion, for the first 2 years has been passable. It has been a passing grade. It has not been an upgrade. It has not been an achievement, nor has it been failing in any such way. He basically has taken Notre Dame and moved it to LSU. That's what he's done. So this season's different. This season, we're playing in an SEC where the top 7 or 8 teams can all win games against each other. And on one hand, you would think, okay, that makes losing games excusable, but it looks like it was an opportunity to be an outstanding football team and to take advantage of a really strong SEC in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality at the top, no dominant teams. And of course, they lost today to Florida. They lost by 2 scores. I did not see any of the game. I planned on watching the game, but I did not see any of the game. But I don't need to see any of the game to know that if you're supposed to be an SEC contender and you've got a path, and they had a legitimate path to get to the SEC championship game and therefore a CFP bid, that you cannot allow your team to collapse against a Florida team and a freshman quarterback. And that's what they did today. He's done a terrible job this year. They collapsed in the second half against Texas A&M. The Alabama game, they were unprepared. They basically lost to a team, for as talented as Jalen Milroe is. LSU last week lost to a team that didn't need to throw the ball, didn't need to hand the ball to their running backs and have them gain yardage. They actually did a nice job defensively in holding Bama's 2 excellent running backs to less than 3 yards per carry. They basically won the game rolling their quarterback out on sweeps and running him for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns. And they couldn't stop that. They could not figure out it. I believe at this point, DeReal, you knew going into that game last weekend, and I knew that Jalen Milroe runs the ball. He is a running quarterback, and there was nothing that he did in that game that was a surprise to anyone, but it just worked over and over and over and over. The offense was horrible. The offensive line's not playing well. They gave up 7 sacks today. Yeah, the LSU situation is just, they are sneaky one of the disappointing teams. It's obvious Florida State is in a class all by themselves, historic collapse. Oklahoma State can thank, and Mike Gundy can thank Florida State for covering up their misdeeds as being an 0-7 team that had all this talent coming back from last year's championship game team. But LSU has been a sneaky, more and more as the season wears on, disappointing. They could have lost to South Carolina. That could have been a loss. So they could be worse. They let UCLA hang around with them into the fourth quarter. Yeah, it's setting up as next year being the hot seat year for Brian Kelly.
By the way, Mark, they play Vanderbilt next week. So
yeah,
that would be very interesting if they lost that game to Vanderbilt, because they could easily lose that game to Vanderbilt with the way LSU playing and with the play Vanderbilt's playing.
Sure.
I wouldn't be shocked at all. Something else I'll ask you, Mark, is what's happening with Oregon? Have they been a bit exposed as what we thought they were this whole time, which isn't the number one team in the country, or do you think there's just a lot of Wisconsin's better than what we think they are? Better with the record indicates type team.
Wisconsin's really not that good a team. No, they're not. and Wisconsin, yeah, are they, is Wisconsin Minnesota? Yes. Are they, pick any number of teams in the Big Ten, Washington, UCLA, that's who they are. They're in that category. So the number one team in the country should roll in there and play well. But Wisconsin was able to take Penn State into a 4-quarter game and have a 1-point lead in the second half. But they have a quarterback who's terrible. He's terrible. Braden Locke is a bad quarterback. I keep giving this guy a chance every time I turn on the TV and watch Wisconsin football, and he has never played a good football game that I have watched. He's terrible every time. They have no explosive playmakers. They've got a decent running back and an offensive line and a okay defense. Actually, they came into this game with the 91st rated rush defense in the country. So really, they beat 3 teams in the Big Ten that came into this game this weekend, 3-16 in the conference. So they haven't beaten anyone any good. No, they're not a good team, and Oregon should go in there and roll. But I give some grace and understanding that you're going to have off weeks, you're going to have down weeks. But I thought an Oregon down week at Wisconsin, and I picked them to cover the spread, not because I thought that they would just be up for this game and ready to roll, but I thought even Oregon playing a down game would go in there and maybe only be up 17-10 at half, and then they would kick it into gear and win the game, 38-20 or something like that. Win it comfortably. But that game was a nail biter.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was shocking to me, Mark. I'm rarely surprised these days, but that game genuinely surprised me. I thought Oregon would be at least able to score 24 points.
Especially if you said the Wisconsin quarterback went 12 for 28 and couldn't hit the broadside of a barn and threw 2 picks in the final 5 or 6 minutes of the game. Now, one was not his fault. The other one was a horrible throw. And then there was another play in which he missed a throw on a 3rd down. Then they had to go for it on 4th down, and he threw the ball. I still don't know where he threw the ball, who he was. Todd Blackledge doing the game said, I don't know where he was throwing the ball. I don't know which receiver because it missed both of them by like 18 yards. I have no idea where the ball was going.
Right. So the other coach that I'll compare with him was Matt Rule, and I think him and Luke Fickell have been in the sneaky disappointment category. We've talked with Brian Kelly.
Yes.
Nebraska's going full Nebraska again this season, Mark. What do we need to do to get Nebraska some hope, some life, and not to just beat Nebraska?
Yeah, Lincoln Riley was saved today because Lincoln Riley and USC, they have been the chokers of 2024, but they ran into the chokers of the last 7 or 8 years. So they ran into the century kings of choking, and therefore they just were punching up in weight class. So even USC couldn't blow that game. I was watching that, and I watched that game start to finish. I actually took some notes. We're going to do a video. I was going to do it before this live stream, but I thought I better jump on here. And even Brock Heward was saying, and his play-by-play guy, I can't think of the guy's name, but he does a great job. Jason, anyway, that they were, quipping a little bit about that this is the game of the two teams that can't win one score games, that always blow games. And I was thinking, no. That is true, but there's one of these two that I was fully confident was going to lose that game and blow it, and that's Nebraska. I was fully confident they were going to find a way to lose that game. Absolutely. I had no doubt.
Think there's something in the water? Do you think they need like a spiritual revival? Like, what's going on down there, Mark? I mean,
kind of exorcism. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I this has happened with multiple coaches and good coaches too. We know Matt Rule's a good coach.
Yeah, I still think he is a good coach. The last coach was not a good coach, though. Scott Frost, they wasted 5 years with Scott Frost. He was not a good head coach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But how come they can't get the 6 wins, man? I'm starting to feel bad for them. They get to 5-2, 5-1, and they just completely plummet.
And now they got Wisconsin and Iowa the next 2 weeks, so I've got no confidence that they're going to win those games. And for Wisconsin being as marginal as they are, I have fairly high confidence that they'll take care of Nebraska next week. And then, of course, Iowa will find a way to beat them 16-13 or whatever they need to do. Yeah, it's incredible how this team, whatever the records are now about their one score history here, it just continues. If you didn't watch them play and you didn't know Matt Rule was on the sideline, you would have just thought that Scott Frost was still there. They look better. They look competitive. And I still believe that USC is an extremely talented team. Their record's no good. But I think I hate to call USC a good team because 5-5 is not good, and they're not good. And Michigan, the same thing. But I still know that there's talent there, and there's a lot of NFL players. But and Nebraska played a reasonably good game. Now, Dylan Raiola, he may one day be a really good quarterback. He's not a good quarterback right now. He doesn't know what he's doing. He makes a ton of mistakes. He misses a zillion throws. He's not a good quarterback either. But he's talented. They probably in the long run did the right thing and went with him. Not that they had too many options. Heinrich Harburg, who was the starting quarterback last year, is atrocious. And they had one of the worst passing offenses in football. So why not just give it to the hotshot 5-star and let them learn on the run? And that's what they're doing. And that's probably that's what I would do as well. But they're paying the consequences of it. And I don't know what to tell you about. They have to rid themselves. They have to hope as they continue to add players through the transfer portal and through recruiting that they are not contaminated by what's going on in that locker room and by the water, and they can kind of break ties between the old regime and the new regime, and that they kind of filter out through graduation and the transfer portal all these guys that know nothing but blowing football games.
Right. And the next thing I'll ask you, Mark, is you've got this cluster now with the Georgia-Tennessee win. You got this cluster of Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia with the same record, and they've all beaten up on one another. You have any idea what the committee's going to do with this hodgepodge of teams?
Well, I hope if they do their due diligence that they're going to compare their resumes, because there is some separation. I don't know what that separation is off the top of my head. I'd have to go through it, but so when you say a hodgepodge, obviously Missouri and LSU have played themselves out. And so now we're looking at Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss. And I even heard somebody mention South Carolina, but we'll leave them out for now. So we've got 6 teams. All right. BYU is finding itself down by 4 points right now. Look at that, against another bad football team. Okay, so 4 to 5 spots for the SEC in the college football playoff. So they're going to have to leave one or two of these teams out.
I mean, they could, or they, I
No,
probably.
they're just going to. Tonight's Georgia-Tennessee game, that might have been an elimination game.
Right, but it's going to be weird because you're going to have Tennessee, who's had to play Alabama and Georgia, and being the better team because Alabama beat Georgia, and they would be left out.
Yeah, they got a round robin situation there. Yeah, you just have to compare resumes. You have to line up their wins and losses. This is how I would do it. I would rank everyone's wins 1 through 10 and start to compare them. Rank their losses. How well did they play in those games? Georgia soundly beat Tennessee. The Tennessee-Alabama game, I don't remember much about that game. I know Tennessee won by a touchdown, but I don't remember how much game control they had. Georgia smacked Texas. That's an excellent win. Now they got smacked by Ole Miss. So Ole Miss has an ugly loss against Kentucky. I don't know. You just have to go through it. And there is going to be, if things, unless they just crystallize in some way that I can't fathom, they are going to have hell to pay to somebody because it's going to be difficult to distinguish these teams.
Right. I'm really hoping and rooting for like Notre Dame to lose to USC or Indiana to get curb stomped by Ohio State. I think either one of those scenarios happens. Then the committee will leave those teams out and put all of them in. Because that's the easier path.
Well, the Indiana thing. Now, with Notre Dame, they definitely should. Indiana, oh boy.
Yeah, I know. It's ugly to talk about. We all love Indiana. They're a cute story, Mark. But, man, their best win is just getting worse and worse by the week.
Yeah, what is their best win? Washington?
Michigan or Nebraska right now.
Michigan, Nebraska, Washington. Yeah. Washington's 6-5. It's Washington, technically. Anyway, I don't know. If Ohio State,
they still have, the committee still has that line of if you're clearly better than another team you're in? Do they still have that line?
I don't even know what that means.
I think we all kind of know, or most people would agree, that Georgia is clearly better than Indiana. I can't explain it, but I think most people would just agree with that vibe. And that might be the decider.
Oh, I decided. I believe all those teams are better than Indiana. All those top 6 teams are better than Indiana. The closest is Texas A&M.
I would agree with that, Mark, but I'm just trying to figure out what the committee's going to do because it's a long and arduous path for them, and the scenarios are plentiful. The only
if Ohio State runs the table and they're number 1 in the country, even if they kill Indiana, and I don't think they're going to beat them 45-3. Maybe they beat them. I threw out a 38-17 score to somebody. I do think that they're going to put me on record right now, everybody, Indiana fans, people that want to see them complete this glorious season. I think it's awesome too. I've enjoyed it. I hope it continues. I hope that, and I'm not saying this because of my rooting interests. I would say this if some other team was involved, Georgia, somebody of that elite status. There's not many to bring up. But I really, and I might have egg on my face this time next week, but I just think Ohio State's going to put them away.
Right, especially the closest game in terms of talent that Indiana's had to play with was Michigan, and Michigan dominated the trenches in the second half.
Yeah.
It was clear Michigan had the better players, and I can't imagine the gap between Michigan and Ohio State's players is pretty large. So the gap between Ohio State and Indiana players is going to be seismic.
Yeah, Michigan had no offense. They have no offense, and they held Indiana to less than 1 yard per play in the second half.
Yeah, that's ugly, and those type of things are, I think, is what going to unfortunately put Indiana out. Which is why the people are going to say we're going to have to expand it to 14 next year, and then we'll expand it to 16 to avoid these types of scenarios. So it feeds into all the narratives as well of people who want more money. Final thing I'll say, Mark, is unfortunately I couldn't take solace in Florida State losing this week because they didn't play this week. So.
No, but they're back on the field against the College of Charleston next week. So who knows? All right, everyone. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Keep in mind, we've got a book selection for all of you. If you love college football, and if you don't love college football, then I got to greatly question your entertainment decisions at 1:00 in the morning on a Saturday/Sunday morning if you're watching me. So we've got a book here. I believe you will like it. Disputed National Champions of the 1990s, College Football's Historical Reset of the Decade. It's not a history book. Yes, it is in part, which some of you will like, but it transforms these results into the modern formulas of the BCS, the 14 playoff, the 12-team playoff, and the proposed 14-team playoff. So please check it out. The link is in the description section of this video and all the videos, not just here on the main channel, but on every channel we have. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's get to our next call. We got our buddy Jackson standing by. Jackson, what's going on tonight?
Oh, it's going pretty good. I'm just counting out the teams that are bowl eligible and not bowl eligible yet. How are you doing tonight, Mark?
I'm doing well. So what have we discovered there?
Well, so far, New Mexico is still alive for bowl eligibility. And right now we've got 14, 22, 31, 35, 47, 57. As of right now, we got 63 bowl eligible teams. And of course, there's 19 spots left. And of course, if there's not enough spots filled, the remaining spot will go to the team that has the highest ranked APR.
Okay. Well, based on the calls we get here, Jackson, I would say that 90-some% of the people would say that they don't care who makes bowl games because bowl games are irrelevant and they don't care. I care, and I also would argue with those people because they will watch the games. So people still watch bowl games, but they just say they don't care about them, but they still watch them.
Oh, yeah. But it was a pretty entertaining day, but like you said, the officiating was just horrible in that Clemson-Pittsburgh game.
Oh, my word.
Ugh. It's disastrous. Like, really, it took 3 minutes to call, like, oh, my God. That was just so bad. It was so bad. But LSU and Brian Kelly, it's been giving me this Jimbo Fisher Texas A&M vibe for whoever knows how long, because LSU's starting to feel it. They've been giving away too much money to Brian Kelly. It's just, oh man, 6-4. We lost to Florida a little bit after we lose to Alabama. Not good. And Billy Napier, it kind of feels like Neil Brown for this season, where he's going to get that vote of confidence for 2020, which, I mean, I know that they said that he got a vote of confidence, but I don't know. I think part of it is the reason why he's staying for 2025 is because again, Florida basketball's got some nasty business with Todd Golden. Apparently, he can't keep his phone off of any place else. That's just some bad business in Gainesville.
Yeah, I don't want to hear too much more about his phone shenanigans. It's
I don't
reminding
want-
me of Hugh Freeze. Having Hugh Freeze flashbacks.
I know, right? Oh man. Well, Kansas, they're looking pretty good as of right now. It's too bad they didn't look like this earlier in the season. But Wisconsin, oh man, they came up short against Oregon. And our buddy Matt Zimick, he was talking about on Twitter today, where if Oregon's going to make calls like they did with that fake field goal, it's a good thing they're doing it against teams that aren't very good on offense like Wisconsin, because they were doing that against really good teams.
Yeah, that was a stupid thing to do. I think Dan Lanning is a really good coach. I like him. I think he's doing great things at Oregon, but man, he just needs to calm down when it comes to just functional football decisions. And he did a really stupid thing, but then again, he was playing Wisconsin's passing offense and Braden Locke, so he was bailed out by just their complete ineptness.
Somebody should tell him it's not NCAA 24, not that this is real life. But
yeah, if you're going to go for it on 4th and 3, then let Dylan Gabriel run the offense. Don't give the ball to your punter to try to make a first down or just kick the field goal. Just don't overthink it. Don't get too cute.
No, that's just a no. And, Nebraska in November, maybe it's just me, but I kind of feel like it's giving me that Charlie Brown trying to kick the football from Lucy vibes. Like they're just a little bit away from getting to bowl eligibility, but they come up short. They're just a bit outside. And of course, next week they got Wisconsin, which we know that's not in their favor, but hopefully they can beat Iowa. I mean, I hope to see them in that losing streak against Wisconsin for the sake of our buddy Justin, but I'm just not seeing it. I am not seeing it for the Cornhuskers.
Yeah, well, I don't have any rooting interest one way or the other, but I guess maybe a little mean side of me wants to just see it continue. just see them blow it again this year. What were they? They were 5-2, right?
Yep.
They were 5-2. I believe they were 5-2 last year, or at least 5-3.
Yep. Then they lose in November. But yeah, November is not their best. But hopefully it gets better for them. But it's just not looking good for them. But those Jayhawks, how about them? What did you think about Wrigley Field today?
I like that. I like the baseball setting for the football games. Now, I wouldn't want it every game, obviously. There's a reason there are baseball stadiums and there are football games not played in baseball stadiums on a regular basis. But for once in a while, I think it's kind of cool.
Oh yeah.
I like the bowl games in, the one that they used to have in San Francisco, the Emerald Walnut Bowl, and whatever other names they had for it. And then, of course, the one at Fenway and the Pinstripe Bowl. And then they play the one at Petco Park, or they did for a while. And then they play the one at Chase Bank in Arizona.
Yeah, those are pretty fun. I mean, I love the idea of seeing a Wrigley Field game annually, or like a Wrigley Field bowl game. That would be pretty cool. I mean, like the the Pinstripe Bowl that's been going on since 2010. That's pretty cool for college football. Fenway Bowl, I had plenty of fun watching that last year with SMU Boston College, and SMU. Speaking of which, got some revenge against Boston College today, and I gotta say, SMU will have to win the ACC in order to get into the playoffs, because unfortunately they cannot rely on nostalgia. They can't rely on, well, we were great in the 1930s, because like a lot of the committee members unfortunately have not read a lot of college football history, They're not taking time out of their day to read it like us, but oh well.
Yeah, SMU, obviously, where they're ranked, they have to win the ACC.
Yeah, they got to. But one thing going on their side is that SMU BYU game. Now, that has been the most underrated game for the season because, like, on the date of September 6th, a lot of us were watching Illinois-Kansas, or we were watching the Packers-Eagles on the Peacock app where Jordan Love got hurt. And, little did anybody know we were going to be seeing BYU get into the top 10, and that was going to be SMU's only loss. And at that time, what people were saying about SMU was they shouldn't even be in the ACC. They're a disaster. But things change really quickly, especially in the landscape of college football.
Exactly. All right, Jackson. Anything else tonight?
Oh, that's about all. Just telling everybody to tune in to The Voice College Football and buy the book, Disputed National Champions, the college football's historical 1990s reset, written by you yourself, man.
Well, I appreciate that, Jackson. And of course, you're going to be with us online at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central with the Alabama show on Monday, correct?
That's correct. I've got a wild show with Parker Thune, John Hoover, Eric Cooper, and Preston Gant. Huge lineup for Oklahoma.
That's a nice lineup right there. Parker Thune, who's one of the best covering Oklahoma football from Rivals, and also K-Ref. You got John Hoover as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's with SI, I believe. Yep. I've had John on many times. Who else?
Preston Gant and Eric Cooper.
And Preston Gant on.
Yep. And I got the right-hand man of Unfair Sports, Eric Cooper, coming on.
Okay. Not familiar with him, but I'm sure he's a fine addition too. So great lineup there. Go to the Alabama channel. Check out Jackson's work on Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm telling you, I can vouch for 3 of those guests. They are excellent and they know their stuff. And then, of course, you do the call-in show on Thursday, correct?
Yes, I do. Thursday night, 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And I figured for Oklahoma week and Auburn week, I might as well go big for those weeks. Wait until you see Auburn week. I won't spoil too much.
I can imagine. All right, Jackson. Well, we appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too, Mark. Stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out.
Yeah, there was a comment made by Chris Fowler tonight because the sideline report coming in from Holly Rowe was that the Tennessee wide receivers were getting cold on the sideline at 55 degrees out. And I was happy to hear Chris Fowler making fun of them. That was a good move by him saying, "Are you serious? These are football players. It's 55 degrees. All right. Next call here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Adam on the line. Adam, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Thanks so much for being on so late. I appreciate it. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone who says that we are very appreciative.
I appreciate that. And I do somewhat apologize to a lot of people that expect me to come on as I have in the past, right when the games are over, or at least the primetime games. But it actually does the channel better when I produce these instant analysis videos because more people watch those than watch this live stream. And I try to get those in because it's a better business move. So try to get those in quickly before I come on here.
Yeah, I'm totally understandable. I just have 3 quick things to say. So about a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to give the eulogy for Oregon, and everyone said I was crazy, that I needed to see a doctor, that I didn't know what I was talking about. And today is Exhibit A of why Oregon confirms exactly what I thought 2 weeks ago. They are finished. They have not – I said last week they haven't beaten a good team on the road. They beat Ohio State by 1 second. They go to a very mediocre Wisconsin team, and Camp Randall barely escape, largely due to Wisconsin's own mistakes and not their superiority. Oregon is not winning anything. That's point number 1. Point number 2, South Carolina beat Texas A&M by 24 points. They beat Oklahoma by 26 points in Norman. They beat Vanderbilt by 21 points, a team that beat Alabama. They beat Missouri today. BYU is down by 4 points against a 3-6 Kansas team, and the committee has the audacity to have BYU at number 6 and no consideration of South Carolina. South Carolina should be in the playoffs. And you asked me a question on one of your last shows. You said, well, you want to put the best teams in. How do you look at them over the course of a season? Well, my answer to that is it determines how you define over the course of a season. That could mean looking at a team and the totality of its results, or it could be defined as looking at the upward trajectory of a team. And when you look at a South Carolina team that lost by 2 to Alabama and is on a 4-game winning streak, and then you see rankings where BYU is at number 6, something is wrong with the playoff system because they're valuing records too much without going underneath those records to see the quality of the wins, the quality of the rosters, the quality of the victories and losses. So I would put South Carolina in the playoffs. And the last thing I would say is when I predicted Notre Dame might win the national championship a few months ago, everyone thought I was crazy. Well, here they are, slowly creeping up. So it causes all of us to re-examine our assumptions. But I wanted to get your thoughts on South Carolina and any other thoughts that you wanted to share in response to what I just said.
So you're right, and you've said this on occasion, that there is a cowardice involved in this, that the safest route is just to do what is expected and to select the teams that have the records that look the best. And if there's some kind of egregious case where you can grab a team that may have a little bit worse record, but you can justify it with a remarkable win or strong losses, then they could probably go outside the box once or twice, possibly. Although Florida State's the only example during the 10-year 14 playoff era in which they elevated a team with a worse record past a team with a better record. So if you go through the 10 years of the college football playoffs, excluding the Florida State example, they never elevated a team that had a inferior record, but a better resume or a better football team past a team. They always took in order the teams with the best records every season.
Yes.
So
Right.
they're facing the situation in which, so the situation with BYU, obviously, if they win the Big 12, they are going regardless, and there doesn't have to be a decision made. Now, if BYU, let's say they pull this game out tonight, they go to the Big 12 championship game, they lose, they're 12-1, they'll still probably make the playoff, to your point. If South Carolina and BYU were to play in a college football playoff game, I wouldn't even give it more than 3 seconds of thought before I would predict South Carolina to win that game.
And that is my point. And I'm looking in the comments section where people are saying, oh, South Carolina, forget it. Adam has some really bad takes. Well, I would like to know the reasoning behind why you say that. South Carolina beat A&M by 24. They beat OU in Norman by 26. They beat Vandy by 21, a team that beat Alabama. Okay? And they just beat Missouri today. Who has BYU beaten? And if Mark, as I agree with you, would take only 3 seconds to say that South Carolina would beat BYU, well, then why the heck is South Carolina not a consideration? Because the whole point of a 12-team playoff, I thought, was to have the best teams play on the field and determine it. So we don't have to have stupid writers and press people doing that, like i.e. the AP. So unless you guys, if you really want that, then you have to make a logical argument about why South Carolina should not be in over BYU. And if you're basing it just on losses, well, then you don't really care about the best team, do you? I'm sorry. All of you said Oregon was number 1. I saw the comments. Oregon is number 1. Adam's crazy. Well, who was right? Look at what happened at Camp Randall today. I think a lot of these comments are very short-sighted and very superficial. And I think we need people like you on the committee, okay, who are going to make decisions that further the best interest of college football, which is putting the best teams on the field, Mark.
So I understand both perspectives. So your perspective is obvious.
Yes.
It can be explained that the best teams don't always have the best record because this is not the NFL. This is not a professional sport where there is a limited amount of teams involved that are very close in talent level. Therefore, there is a microscopic difference between schedule difficulty. The schedules are vastly different. And we all know that the best teams don't always have the best schedules. And I've watched South Carolina play a lot of football this year. I saw them play their worst game of the year. That was against Ole Miss. And it was kind of a slow grind 27-3 loss. That is the one game that they've played this year that has not been a good game. Not a well-played game by them. However, they were playing one of the 10 best teams in the country. I don't believe that BYU has played a 10 best team in the country. And the other games that South Carolina has played, I've seen them play LSU, I've seen them play Alabama, I've seen them play Texas A&M. I've watched them play quite a bit, and they're a really good football team. And they're a better football team than BYU. So if we want to properly judge teams as you prefer, you want, and just like the real MVP, you want to see the 12 or whatever the number is, best teams in the country playing regardless of their record. People are uncomfortable with that. And when I posted this comment that Troy's making here, that the season should matter. So what he is stating there, to now play his side, is that BYU was given a schedule by the Big 12, and they forged their own non-conference schedule, and they have gone out and executed against that schedule. And that's what's been expected of them. They play in a particular conference, and as long as we have this structure of college football, meaning there's a Big 12, there's an ACC, a Big 10, and an SEC, then we need to honor the teams that emerge out of those conferences as the best teams in those conferences.
I agree with you that the season should matter, but it depends on how you define the word matter. Matter can mean the entirety of the schedule matters, or it could mean the upward trajectory of a team despite prior losses matters. And so if you use the latter reasoning, there's no excuse for BYU being ranked above Ole Miss, Alabama, even Georgia, and there's no reason to say South Carolina should have no shot when you yourself said that the number 6 ranked team by the committee would lose to them. But I know you have other callers, so I don't want to monopolize your time. But Mark, always great having these discussions with you. I appreciate you listening, and thank you for your show. It's great.
I appreciate you being here, Adam. You got your Rutgers show coming up on Tuesday, correct?
Monday at 7 p.m. Yeah.
My apologies. Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's on the Rutgers channel, everyone. So join Adam for that. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And Adam simply wants to see the best teams in the playoff. Most of you, as it seems, I think I can pretty much take the temperature of the room, and we've done this, had these discussions for a long enough time, that you want the results. Most of you would rather see the results count, meaning if you play the worst teams in the country, but you finish 12-0, then you should go to the playoff. I don't have necessarily an issue with either one, except if I was charged with selecting the teams, then I would want either one of two things to happen. Me to be presented with a criteria in which I would need to select them, or to be asked to develop the criteria myself. And if we want the best teams, if we want the records to reflect the best teams in college football, then we need to revamp the whole thing, and we need to restructure the leagues. we saw a Colorado team today beat Utah by 4 touchdowns, and that team is probably going to win the Big 12 championship, and they could not come anywhere close to beating Nebraska a couple months ago. Now, I don't know what would happen if they played again, but I do know that Colorado lost and got stomped by Nebraska. Nebraska, it appears today, is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. And that's just one example. So let's not extrapolate that out, but I'm just giving an example of the differences in these conferences. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Rob on the line.
Hey, Mark. It's been an eventful call-in show so far.
It has.
I just find it funny how Notre Dame perpetually lives in some people's heads. So going back to another caller, not to name names, but the reason Notre Dame is ranked where they are is because A, they went into Kyle Field at Texas A&M at night and beat Texas A&M pretty soundly, despite not playing a great game themselves. Neither team played great, but Notre Dame kind of ran away with that game at the end. And then they also have been blowing away everybody they've played, with the exception of NIU, which, yes, they had a horrible loss. You can't get around that. But, every team has had a hiccup. Almost every team this year in college football has had a hiccup. And going back to what someone else just said, again, not to name names, but Oregon won. They're number 1 in the country. They didn't look good? No, they did not. But they won. In a season where a lot of teams are not winning those games, they're not finding a way to win those types of games where they lay an egg, like Notre Dame losing to NIU or Alabama losing to Vanderbilt and Tennessee, and we just saw what Tennessee did to how they played against Georgia. I mean, almost every team in college football this year has had at least one ugly game or a bad hiccup or this or that. And when you are struggling against a team like Wisconsin and you still win that game, that's better than losing. So until Oregon proves, and here's the thing, right? I've said this before on the call-in show. I'm more of a what is your ceiling type of guy. Like, I want to see what a team is capable of at their ceiling. I don't care about what their floor is. As long as they're winning most of their games, then what is your ceiling? And we already know that Oregon's ceiling is to not only hang with Ohio State, who many at the beginning of this year felt was the best team in the country, or certainly has the best, or one of the top 3 rosters in the country. Oregon beat them, right? So are we forgetting that? So Oregon is number 1 because they beat an incredibly good Ohio State team, and they've won all their games. That's why they're number 1. They're not finished until they are finished, so they need to prove that they can lose. It's been a weird year, man. I mean, just watching this Georgia Tennessee game, the SEC is just so crazy it boggles the mind. It's a weird year. I just wanted to, I had some issues with some of the points other people were making. I just wanted to air out my opinion on those points.
Well, I'll say it this way. I've gone through every team that's competed for a national championship year by year by year by year. You have to go all the way back to 1995, Nebraska in 1995, before you find a team that did not struggle or lose to a marginal team. So if you take every team that's competed for a national championship since 1995, they have either lost to, i.e. Ohio State in 2014, the national champion that year, lost to a 7-6 Virginia Tech team, or they struggled, meaning it came down to the wire against a mediocre team. So everybody has down weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the fact that, is it a good thing at this point in the season to have a 3-point win against Wisconsin? No, I mean, you don't want that, but it's certainly better than a 3-point loss. So Oregon, again, they retain their undefeated, status in a power conference, a power 2 conference, really. If you look at the Big Ten and the SEC as the premier conferences, which they are. and they've got that win over Ohio State. So again, to me, the ceiling for Oregon is still the highest or among the highest in the entire country, and that's why they're number one. Are they going to stay number one? I don't know. I mean, the committee could drop them based on that performance, but I don't know who you're going to put at. Like I guess Ohio State could move up, but Ohio State lost to Oregon, so that's not going to happen. Texas didn't look good against Arkansas today. They look pretty horrible, actually. Their offense was anemic, and it's been anemic with the exception of a couple of games. So, I mean, I don't really see Oregon dropping because, like, who are you going to put ahead of them,
So I was watching the end of that game thinking if Oregon blows this game, you could actually make an argument that they would just stay number one. You could make that argument. I'm not saying that they should. I guess Indiana would have elevated to number one, but you can't put Ohio State above them, even though there is an argument that Ohio State should have beaten them and that the game was on the road. And if you believe in the whole 3 points for a road team, and that's what Vegas judges that to be, I don't discount any of that, but I just think that you have to honor the head-to-head. Therefore, Oregon, until further notice, is always, in my book, going to be ranked ahead of Ohio State. And therefore, yes, they're the number one team in the country. And I think they just have the best resume, and they have the best performance to date.
Right. Well, and the thing, so if Oregon plays like they did today against Ohio State in the rematch, then yes, they will definitely lose. But they didn't when it counted, and again, you could, if it wasn't for the fact that every other team under them has not played great several times. Like I said, Texas didn't look great today. Ohio State, yeah, they beat Northwestern, but they have that loss against Oregon. So it's all going to work itself out anyway. So, people getting worked up. I know why DeReal hates Notre Dame, because he sees them taking a spot as, one of his precious SEC teams that he loves so much. But if that was a problem, then maybe maybe Texas A&M should have beat Notre Dame when they had the chance. Just putting that out there. But no, I think Notre Dame, if they lose another game, they're definitely out. So that'll sort itself out if it happens. They're going to play USC at the Coliseum, which Notre Dame has a history of not performing very well there. So there's a possibility that they could lose that game. Heck, they could lose to Army. I don't think they will, but they could. So that'll sort itself out. Indiana's going to sort itself out when they play Ohio State, as long as they don't get boat raced. And again, hate to burst some people's bubbles, but no, Indiana's not getting dropped out unless they get absolutely destroyed. Like if they get boat raced by Ohio State, like you said, like maybe 45-3 or something, then yeah, I could see the committee dropping them out, of a playoff spot potentially. But if they hang in there with Ohio State, they're not getting bumped out.
So, Rob, I take exception to your term that everything's going to work itself out. I always push back on that statement. Everything is going to work itself out. How is everything going to work itself out? Like, I don't see that happening. I don't see any scenario in which there will not be teams left out of the playoffs that will have resumes that can be argued that they should be in the playoff.
No, I'm more talking about Indiana and Notre Dame specifically, because here, again, if Notre Dame wins out, they're in. Period. Like that's the committee's basically already made that clear with the way they've ranked them. And then if Indiana, they're not. I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State, but if they beat Ohio State, they're definitely in, right? Obviously. Sure. And again, as long as they don't lose to Ohio State by a ridiculous margin, I still think they're in. I think the only chance for Indiana to get bumped out of the playoff is if they just get absolutely boat raced, like you said, 45-3 or something like that. In that case, the committee might drop them out of the top 11.
But
I'd
in
say
that
12.
circumstance, I don't know that a lot of people would agree with that, regardless of how much they lost by. They could lose 55-0, and a lot of people would reason that they went 11-1 and they play in the Big Ten, and why should they get penalized for losing one game, regardless of what the score was, because the outcome of the game is just simply, did you win or did you lose? And they went 11-1 and they played 11 excellent games. I'm just using the counter argument that regardless of that game, that Indiana has an argument to make the playoff.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I would take them out of the playoff if they lost by a lot to Ohio State. I think the committee might. I see because there's already so much national media pushback against Indiana. They've got some hype, but they've also got a lot of critics in the media talking about, oh, Indiana doesn't deserve to be there and this and that.
Yeah. Well, just to get back to your phrase, everything works itself out. I do agree with your Notre Dame application of that. If they lose a game, they're out. If they win their games, they're going to be in. And I have no issue with that whatsoever. I certainly have no issue with if they sweep the rest of the games and finish 11-1, that they'll be in. If they lost a game, if they lost to, I don't see their resume being strong enough, but me personally, I would still include them in an evaluation as a 10-2 football team against all these other 10-2 football teams to figure out whether they should be in. But again, when it comes to Indiana, I don't necessarily see how that, unless they win the game against Ohio State, is going to be a slam dunk selection one way or the other, where it will just work itself out. Not with a long line of 10-2 SEC teams involved.
Well, what I mean by that is, again, in my opinion, if they win or hang close, if it's a competitive game, they're in. Again, this is all my speculation, my opinion. So if they win, if they beat Ohio State, or if they hang close, they're in. If they lose, again, this is my opinion, they could be out. Like, they could likely be out. Because again, not that I would put them out, but because there's so much pushback from a lot of media pundits, national media pundits, people that are saying that they're overrated, overhyped, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just disagreeing with how that's defined as working itself out.
Maybe that was a poor choice of words for Indiana. Yeah, but
yeah, it does work. It always works itself out because the committee makes the selection, and so it's anytime somebody's called me and said, it's going to work itself out. Well, obviously, yes, there's a conclusion to this. So it's going to work itself out. Even if it's inaccurate, even if it's unfair, it's going to work itself out. If I get a credit card bill and I owe $20,000 and I just leave it sit, it's going to work itself out. Yeah. There's going to be a conclusion. I'm going to be hauled off to jail, or I'm going to be fined $1 zillion. It's going to work itself out, but that doesn't mean that is the correct way for it.
Yeah. Like I said, maybe not the perfect choice of words there in regards for Indiana, but I guess I was more talking about in my brain, like how I see it unfolding. I see it pretty cut and dry for me, for what I predict the committee is going to do. I should put it that way. But yeah, other than that, and going to Notre Dame real quick, if they lose again, they're out. And as a Notre Dame fan, they don't deserve, if they lose another game to either, to any of the teams that they're playing, Army or USC, they don't deserve to be in with that loss to NIU. Now, if they'd have lost to if they'd had a decent game that they lost, like a decent opponent that they lost to, and they ended up 10-2, then yeah, sure, you could maybe have them. But you can't. After they lost to NIU, you have got to win the rest of your games, and you've got to do it convincingly. Now they've done it. They've won all their games, and convincingly so. But they've got 2 more games to go. So, Army, they should win their next 2 games, and I still think they'll do it convincingly. But if they don't, they're out. That's just how it should be. And I think there's so many good SEC teams that you really could have like 6 or 7 SEC teams in there, and I wouldn't bat an eye. I mean, I still think Ole Miss, the way they've been playing, and Georgia, apparently, I said earlier, they are the most inconsistent elite team that I've seen. Like, they have the potential to put their foot on the gas and just clown people, but then they also have the potential to just like get overwhelmed and play terribly. So and a lot of that falls on Carson Beck and how he performs, but Georgia's kind of an enigma to me right now. I just don't understand. That's a team that's hard to bet and like hard to see what they're going to do, but they definitely should be in the playoff, I think, based on their roster and their potential.
All right. Anything else, Rob?
No, that's it.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
Yep.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. And best way to contribute here would be to use the Amazon link. It's in the description section of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use our link. It's completely transferable. It's completely indistinguishable in any such way. As soon as you use our link, Amazon, they're smart people. They've set up a system in which it automatically identifies you, and it's just like you using whatever link you are currently using. So when you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section of all the videos. All right, let's get to the next call. I just posted a comment by number one ND fan who says every SEC and Big Ten team that does not play in the conference title game should be disqualified. Okay, so we would have 2 teams from the Big Ten. We would have 2 teams from the SEC. That's 4. ACC and Big 12 champions would be 6. We would have the group of 5 represented. That would be 7. If Notre Dame loses a game, do we believe that they're qualified for the playoffs? So we've got 7 teams. I don't know where this individual expects the other 5 teams to come from. All right. There is some math involved. You got to fill 12 spots. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Michael.
Hey, Mark. How you doing, sir?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Pretty good. Hey, can I open up Pandora's box for a minute, please?
Go right ahead.
All right. Everybody's thinking that Ohio State would beat IU, and that could very well happen. But I don't say them getting boat race. But what happens if IU boat races Ohio State next week? Are they out of the playoff, you think?
Is who? Ohio State out?
Yeah.
They might be. Yeah. If they lose another game, whether they lose to Indiana or to Michigan and are 10-2 and have to be compared against all these SEC teams, sure, they could be.
But no, I'm saying they finished 10-2, but they did boat race next week.
Yeah, I'm saying if they go 10-2, they're going to have to be compared to these SEC teams that are 10-2.
Yeah, but is that going to work itself out though with the SEC? Not everybody's going to end up finishing 10-2 though, or is it going to be guaranteed that there's going to be more than 2 or 3 teams that finish 10-2 in the SEC?
Well, we just had the SEC standings up here. It's pretty obvious that there's going to be a ton of 10-2 teams come out of the SEC. It's inevitable.
Yeah, and as far as the Oregon game tonight, I mean, like Dutton, I was just looking back the last few years, teams like with Georgia, Michigan, and Alabama, and you can look at their schedule during the season. Didn't they each have a couple of close games at one point during a few close games during the season?
Sure.
But what makes them, like with Adam saying, oh, they're not a good team? Just because they had a 3-point win tonight against Wisconsin, are they really a bad team?
According to Adam, he doesn't think they're very good.
Yeah, okay. Did he say that?
To what degree? I don't know. You would have to talk to Adam. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and speak for Adam.
Mm-hmm. Not bad. But which team would impress you? Which team impressed you the most today?
Today?
Yeah.
Who impressed me today? Georgia.
Yeah, that was a huge win. So pretty much Tennessee eliminated. themselves tonight for
No.
the SEC?
Nope.
But how? Okay, now the thing I'm trying to figure out too is how's that going to work between Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama?
Well, not just Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. Texas, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss.
No, I mean between Tennessee beat Georgia, Alabama beat Georgia, Tennessee beat Alabama.
It's a
How would
much
they-
more difficult, more complex situation than that.
Mm-hmm. Like that, not bad. And just wondering stuff like
We
that.
have, we have to compare the resumes, the complete resumes of all these teams, and not get hung up on who beat who. You know, if it simply came down to Georgia and Ole Miss for the final spot in the playoffs, well, Ole Miss handled Georgia. They should go to the playoffs. If it simply came down to Georgia and Tennessee for the final playoff spot, well, Georgia handled Tennessee. Therefore, they should be in the. But it's not going to come down to that. It's going to come down to multiple teams. So their entire resume is going to have to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering stuff like that. And there was one thing I was trying to figure out. Yeah. Oh, does anybody want to play Colorado right now?
I would think that there's all sorts of teams that wouldn't mind playing them.
But yeah, especially with Utah and stuff today and stuff like that.
Utah didn't want to play them today. I don't know that Ohio State or Georgia would have much issue. I think that they would rather play Colorado than have to play Ole Miss and Oregon and some of the teams that they have to play.
I guess what I'm saying, fair point. I guess what I'm saying is, are they starting to become a dangerous team with how they're starting to play good football right now? Ever since they lost the Nebraska game,
I'd like to see them play a decent team before I'd make that evaluation. My tendency is to say no. They're not going to contend in any such way. I think that they'll be fun to watch. I think they got a great quarterback and they have some great skill position players, and they've improved their offensive line considerably from being a complete train wreck last year to being only slightly worse than mediocre, and they still have a pretty marginal defense. So yeah, they're fun to watch, and they've got, if you want to take the three best players off every team in America and they're going to play like pickup basketball, then they'd be in the running, but that's not what we're working with here.
But when was the last time a Big 12 team had an elite defense, though?
Wow. That's a great question. The last time a Big 12 team had an elite defense, I would say that some of those TCU teams in 2014, 15, that those were really good defenses. I would say the Texas defense that went to the national championship game in 2009, in that realm, in terms of having just no question, there's no debate. Those early 2000s Oklahoma and Texas defenses with Roy Williams and Rocky Kalmus and all those guys.
Yep.
Those defenses.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's been over 20 years and stuff like that. But no, I was just wondering stuff like that. So Georgia had the best win of the day and stuff like that. So I see Texas only won by 10. Was it just a lackadaisical game for him today, or do you think it's just ho-hum, easy day at the office?
Well, it's a great question. I saw quite a bit of that game, and Texas came out and they got an interception, drove it down the field, scored a touchdown easily, and looked like they may do what Ole Miss did to Arkansas last week. Ole Miss put up 63 points. So when you compare what Ole Miss was able to do on offense versus Texas today, because aside from a couple drives, Texas really couldn't do much offensively against Arkansas. And once Arkansas stopped making mistakes, they got back in the game. It was a 13-10 game in the fourth quarter. And yeah, I thought it was a legitimate game, and Arkansas probably could have pulled off an upset if they would have not turned the ball over twice.
You there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello,
You there, Mark?
Michael. Okay, I guess Michael can't hear us anymore. We'll have to keep rolling here. Let's move it on to Mooley. Welcome into the Voice for College Football. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. How's it going?
I am doing just fine. What's the good word?
I will say I was a little disappointed that Missouri lost because I was hoping we could get 7 2-loss SEC teams. But I'm still hoping that A&M can pull out and make it 6 at least. Just looking at these standings right here. What is this? Yes, 6.
Yeah, those are the 6 teams that are in play.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too, Mark. Is I know you've been talking about on the show, but there's got to be at least 2 of these teams left out. I'll say this: if A&M beats Texas shouldn't be in the playoffs. Their best win would be by 3 points to Vanderbilt, and then they beat up on their next best win was Michigan? And then
so you're saying, okay, Texas A&M beats Texas, and Texas drops to 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, let's say all these teams can finish 10-2.
Right.
Obviously, 2 of them will go on to the SEC championship game, and so somebody's going to finish 10-3, and somebody's going to go 11-2 and
Right.
be the champion. So you're saying that I don't know what you're saying.
Oh no, I'm just saying. Okay, yeah, okay, you're right. So one team would have 3 losses after the championship game, so they'd be technically 5 2-loss teams. I'm just saying I don't know the tiebreaker or who would go to the SEC championship. All I'm saying is if Texas loses to A&M,
Yep,
they should not be out of all the quote unquote 2-3-loss teams whatever in contention. They should not be the ones in play. But the thing is, they're sitting at a high number 3 spot because God knows why, brand. But,
well, they have had dominant wins, but
yes.
I'm not going to defend their schedule because you're right. I recorded a video before the season to show how weak their schedule was, and it's played out pretty much the way it looked in the preseason. They have one of the weakest schedules in the SEC, if not the weakest schedule in the conference.
Right, but if they do lose another, I don't know if the committee will be willing to drop them that much.
Well, they should be.
They should be. And then there's always also the tie-up between like the Tennessee, Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia, that you were just talking about too. It's hard if I'm going to give my honest opinion, I'd say out of all those 4, I may have to say Tennessee just in terms of because the thing is, yes, their best win is against Bama, but I think you can make the argument that Bama is playing much better. Well, maybe not much better, but they're playing better than what they were against Tennessee. And when you look at also who else Tennessee has played, they've had some pretty close wins as well. They had like a 10-point win against Kentucky. I think they went to overtime against Florida as well.
Yes.
So Tennessee as well.
So if I get this straight, you're saying Tennessee is the best resume out of all those teams?
No, I'm saying it's the worst. I'm saying they should be
the worst. Okay.
I'm saying they should be behind Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. I know Ole Miss has that one really bad loss to Kentucky, but they also have a very dominant win against Georgia. I don't know how the LSU win stacks up now because they're going down. And then who else has Ole Miss played actually?
Wouldn't you give a comparable evaluation of Tennessee's win against Alabama and Ole Miss's win against Georgia?
I'm sorry? Like you're saying they're comparable?
If you're comparing Tennessee and Ole Miss, Tennessee beat Alabama, Ole Miss beat Georgia.
Yeah.
Tennessee did not lose to somebody like Kentucky.
But Ole Miss also dominated a team like South Carolina. Granted, I didn't even watch that game, so I don't know how South Carolina was at that point of the season. But just at least from the box score wise, it looks good.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing that I said to somebody earlier.
Mm-hmm.
However many of these teams finish at 10-2, 10-3, 11-2. Well, the 11-2 team is going to be in the playoff under this scenario. So they're already there. The committee is just going to simply have to review the entire resume of these teams. And it's almost impossible for us to do it sitting here unless we had a chart that had all these teams and their wins ranked best to worst and their losses ranked. And we could make some kind of deduction on who's got the best resume.
That's true. Yeah, we'd have to talk about that in depth too. I will say I am hoping as many teams win out because I just want to see, for one, chaos, and just to all the people that for one, all the people that for many years I remember would criticize the SEC and say SEC wasn't good. It was only Bama and Georgia, because Bama and Georgia would always win their sides of the division, and they would always be looking at analyzing the loss columns, like, oh, this team should have been in, this team should have been in, but no, why is Bama's overrated, Georgia's overrated, yada yada, whatever. Well, now there are a lot of teams with 1-2 losses, but who else would you put above them? Because they're beating up on each other and they're solid teams. Would you put a 2-loss? I'm trying to think.
I'm going to play the other side of that. I don't disagree with what you just said, but the counter argument would be every conference goes 500.
Mm-hmm.
So once these conferences start to play each other, the results are the results. We can evaluate the results, and we can evaluate how the power within the conference is distributed, whether it's a top-heavy conference, whether it's balanced, or however it's distributed. But every conference, the number of wins and losses are exactly the same. So when we sit here and say Tennessee beat Alabama and Alabama beat Georgia, et cetera, from just a standpoint of evaluating those wins, it all comes out to 500. So how did this conference do, and how did these teams do outside the conference? That's the only thing that tells us how good the conference is. That is the only thing that tells us how good the conference is. Okay, Texas beat Michigan. Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame. Georgia beat Clemson. Georgia will probably beat Georgia Tech. Tennessee beat NC State. Alabama beat Wisconsin. Ole Miss beat Wake Forest. I don't know that we can gather that much from that. My evaluation of why the SEC is the best conference, I don't know that it's the best conference based on this season's results. I don't think that there are enough results to let us know which conference is the best, because the SEC has the best non-conference results of any conference, but not by much. The reason I believe that the SEC is the best conference is because, number one, it's been the best conference for 15 or 20 years. Also, it has delivered the best non-conference results this season, not by much, but by some. It has acquired the best talent, and that always manifests itself three years later when these players are drafted into the NFL draft, and it produces the most draft selections. Now, there might be an argument by somebody in the chat that says, what does that have to do with what's going on this season? Well, it doesn't. It's not a direct byproduct, but it's an indication, And that's all we've got to go on are the results on the field, and the results on the field outside the conference are fairly indistinguishable. Again, I would say, and I post videos at the beginning of the season that go through all of the conferences and their out of conference games, and I evaluate the play. And the SEC did play better than the other conferences, but not by much.
And I do agree when it comes to the out of conference thing. For one, I need to start watching more of your videos. I got to start watching all of them. But two, there's all. I guess the only data point now that I'm thinking about it, I guess like the only real data point, because I know like Wisconsin, they're mid, even for within their conference. Michigan, they're very middle of the pack in their conference as well, etc. I think the only data point I could think about is Georgia dominating Clemson, who, by the way, seeing how they played against Pitt, seeing how they played against Louisville, not even that confident. Besides the point, they're still in the top 25. And then based on that, I'm like, okay, well, Georgia dominated them. And then, Bama beat them, but then Georgia beat Tennessee. How do these ranks stacked up? So I guess I can see where you're coming from that place. Like that's not really enough to tell you.
So just to give it a little bit more context, Muley, what I just stated about how these teams performed and what the results are outside the conference probably does not sound, as you just mentioned, does not sound impressive. And if somebody's an SEC detractor, they're going to hear that and say, well, what does that prove? That doesn't sound that great. There aren't that many great non-conference wins by anybody. So if we went to, while that did not sound impressive, it was still a Texas win over Michigan, a Georgia win over Clemson, and probably over Georgia Tech in a couple weeks, a Tennessee win against NC State, a Bama win against Wisconsin, an Ole Miss win against Wake Forest. And then it's a Texas A&M loss to Notre Dame, a game in which the score was tied with 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. Okay. If you go, let's say, to the ACC, the entire conference has basically beaten no one of consequence. Okay, Miami beat Florida. That might be the best win off the top of my head. I can't come up with a better win. Anybody in the chat, please come up with a better win that the ACC has than Miami beating a marginal, decent, okay Florida team. That's the best win in the entire conference, outside the conference. So these games are difficult to come up with for any conference. The Big Ten. Who did the Big Ten beat outside the conference? Penn State beat West Virginia. They're 5-5. Maryland beat Virginia. They're 5-5. Rutgers beat Virginia Tech. They're 5-5. Ohio State didn't play anyone. Iowa lost to Iowa State. Minnesota lost to North Carolina. Illinois beat Kansas. They just went to 4-6 tonight because they beat BYU. Again, that's my point, is that I just rolled out the SEC wins and they don't sound impressive, but they're still the best results of any conference in the country. No conference can say, oh, we beat Oregon, Ohio State, Clemson, Washington. There's no conference can just roll out this impressive list of non-conference wins. There aren't enough of those games played.
Yeah, and I guess because now I went like a whole thing in my head just now, like a whole deep thing as you were talking. Because how I see it too is, I see each conference they have like an upper tier, a middle tier, and a low tier, and some of these conferences, they have bigger versions of this tier. Like Big Ten, huge distinction between their upper tier and their middle tier versus their lower tier, right?
Yep.
Very stratified, or whatever the word is.
Yep.
SEC, there's a lot of the it's kind of a, how do you say, between upper and middle tiers, kind of like blurred. But then like I'd say like middle lower, like Vanderbilt or Arkansas, they're not Mississippi State bad or like Oklahoma, but they're clearly not like in the upper parts of there too. And where I'm going with this is that in every conference, it doesn't matter how good or bad a team is, there are teams that will come out and perform. Will perform one week. The only difference is Alabama doesn't lose to Stanford by 3. Ole Miss won't lose to Kansas, who, by the way, Kansas, even though they're a 6-loss team, they've been close in most of their games. And we know they were a 9-win team last season. They do still have Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, Kobe Bryant, Quinn Skinner. They still have some of those players, but they are a 6-loss team too. So maybe that's not even the best example to use, but still, only scoring 13 points on them is what is the concern for me. Knowing the defensive play in that conference is where I'm just like, okay, well, BYU, the way that they lost is what kind of concerned me too. I mean, Colorado has been playing well, like you said. Yes, they had a bad loss in Nebraska. Are they the same team that they were in the beginning of the season? I don't know, because I wasn't watching them in the beginning of the season. I've been watching their past couple weeks, and I sit at home all day watching football too. So if anyone wants to say, "Oh, well, you don't watch enough games," I know nobody in those comments are watching all the games. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but that's my 2 cents.
Let me say this. This might be a little clearer in terms of what I think of conference play. So it may have sounded like I meant that conference games don't matter. They don't tell us anything about how good the conferences are. And in essence, they don't, because again, everybody has to win the game, and there has to be another team that loses every game. And of course, if you add up all the conference records for every conference, they're exactly 500. But the distribution within the conference, the power structure within the conference is important, because we don't care who the 16th best team in the SEC is, that they're the best 16th place team in any conference. That doesn't matter toward the playoff. So the weight distribution, the power distribution within the conference matters. So the conference games do matter, in that if there was a conference where there was a perfectly balanced conference there, where every team went 4-4, the entire conference went 4-4, our results would tell us that, okay, that's really fun, that's really interesting, that's a really balanced conference, but none of those teams are that good. So that conference, in a sense, as it pertains to championship level play, doesn't have any good teams. Top to bottom, it may be just as good as any other conference, or it might actually be the best conference top to bottom, but it doesn't matter top to bottom. It matters the top, because we're trying to figure out what team should be in a playoff. Therefore, it does matter what the separation is in the power structure within the conference. So just to be a little bit more clear about what I think of conference games and what they tell us.
Well, no, Mark, I do agree to you on that point. The thing is, we have nothing else to work with in that case. So you have to try to evaluate. And I know that's a flaw in the system, but like, for example, even though we don't have definitive proof, we can use our ability to infer and say, okay, take 2 3-loss teams. Okay, South Carolina is probably better than Syracuse. Syracuse has beaten some solid teams that are in the ACC, but they also lost to Stanford, right? And they've also had some pretty close performances. I haven't watched too much. I mean, I watched that debacle against Pittsburgh, so that's probably why I might be a little lower on them. But when you when you're looking at like the performances game by game, when you're looking at how they played throughout the game and stuff, like that's all. Well, because for one, that's all we have to look at. One has no choice but to say, yeah. And I know what you're coming from this standpoint where it's like, okay, well, you're saying that because that's how they played within their own conference. Who knows how the elites? Because South Carolina has played close with with two other elite teams. But how do you know how South Carolina would perform with the elite teams of the ACC? We don't know that. And
Well, we're going to find out in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is true. So yeah, I think I've run my course here, Mark.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
For sure. No, I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
All right, folks, welcome into the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you being here. We typically go live on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday after the games. I'll be back Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time, which is just about, less than 9 hours from now. And I will be releasing my top 25 that actually makes sense sometime on Sunday as well. All right, we do have a super chat came in tonight, so I guess this is my pay for the time together here. Ryan, thank you so much for the contribution. Is there any hope for a discouraged Badger fan? Yeah, there's hope. Your head coach has a track record. I expected him to do better than he has. Understand also that you've played, I think, the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten. You need a quarterback. Go recruit. You know what? Recruit a quarterback, but get one in the transfer portal. If Wisconsin had a top half of the Big Ten passing attack, they would have won that game tonight. If they had Penn State's passing attack, they would have beaten Oregon today. So I know that doesn't solve all your problems. I don't know what happened, I guess, with Jim Leonard leaving, that there went the Wisconsin defensive scheme development, all of that, because although Wisconsin played a really good game tonight, and I can tell that I've been up way too long already, Wisconsin is not the program that it once was. All right, let's go to Defiant on the line. What's going on, sir?
Nothing much, Mark. Yeah, I'll be really quick about what I want to stay here. But ASU's really been a surprising team in the Big 12 this year. I don't think many people predicted them to win 8 games so far out of 10. And I mean, they have a chance next week to beat BYU and be in the Big 12 championship game and potentially play for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
But then would that also kind of be a reason why fans would say, the 12-team playoffs sucks because ASU could get a top 4 seed and now really be one of the best 4 teams in terms of conference champion?
Yeah, a lot of people are going to say that. I'm not going to be one of them, but I get it. They're not one of the 4 best teams in the country. They're not one of the 14 best teams in the country, but this is the system we have. So the system is a combination of, and I think it works. It's not perfect, but I think it works. There's some tension between honoring records, honoring conference championships, and giving preference to those teams. But there is also a component of just evaluating the teams and giving at-large bids to the teams that the committee deems to be the best otherwise. So there's a tension between the two. It's not simply a committee saying, we don't care what conference you play in, we're going to select the 12 best teams. And you know what? Arizona State just won the Big 12, but they're not one of the 12 best teams in the country. You're out. We've got 12 teams, and they're all in the Big 10 and the SEC. Nor is it a complete, I don't want to call it a meritocracy, but where, okay, we're going to give a spot to the MAC champion, the Sun Belt champion, the Conference USA champion, because you earned it. We don't care who you played. If you win a conference championship, then you're in the playoff. There's a tension there between two philosophies.
And I mean, you're going to have years down the line where a conference champion, one of the Power Four champions, isn't the best team, best 14 teams in the country. I mean, this is why you have expanded conferences. You're going to have teams that win a conference that might be like 9-3, might be like the 30th best team in the conference in the country, but they win, the Big 12 or the ACC. So I mean, it's going to have years where champions are like the 30th best team in the country out of these big 16, 17 team conferences. So, I mean, there'll be a point where, again, ASU wins it. Yes, they're not the top 14th or even the top 25 team maybe, but they're still a pretty good, decent squad. You got to give, credit due. They won the Big 12. They ran the table down the end of this season.
Yeah, and that's why they're going to be given a spot, or they will have earned a spot. But the Big Ten is going to have 4 teams, and the SEC is going to have 4 or 5 teams.
And I mean, hey, they got 4 teams in. I mean, what else do you want the committee to do in terms of the Big Ten SEC? They're going to get multiple teams in.
Well,
it's not like
the people that support the SEC would say that the 5th best team in the SEC is better than the Big 12 champion.
Oh, and I would disagree. I think they're probably better than the ACC champion. But you run the table, you win your conference, you should be given something for that. Even if you're not the top 15 team in the country or top 25 team. You went out there, you won your conference, you ran the table again like ASU might be doing, or even Colorado. Colorado's a top, they're ranked, but like if they weren't ranked and they're ASU's place, it would be the same conversation.
Absolutely.
So I mean, again, you got to give credits due. They're going to be one of them is going to be a champion potentially, and I mean, again, is Colorado even one of the best teams in the country? No, but they ran the table. They won the Big 12. They're a conference champion. So I really think you got to look at the system like again, you got to give respect to the conference champion, no matter what their record is, no matter if they're ranked or not. They ran the table and they won their championship and won a conference.
Yeah. And again, there's merit to your perspective. And then there is also merit to people that say that they just want to see the 12 best teams in the country play.
And I mean, yeah, I'm down for either system. If either system works, I'm here for it. But again, in this system, you have to give the top 4 conference champions a spot in playoff. And I mean, again, if you expand it, maybe it's 5. I don't know. Again, but you just have to realize that the Big 12 champion is going to be a top 4 seed. Doesn't matter who wins. If it's BYU, Colorado, ASU, even Iowa State has a chance potentially at this. Some things have to go their way, but one of these teams is going to be it. And SMU looks like they're going to be the ACC champion. So really, those top 2 teams right there are just going to be the 3 and 4 seeds. So really, again, they're going to be a top 4 seed.
Absolutely. I think we already, we know what the system is. So yes, they're going to be in the top 4 seeds. All right, Defiant. Anything else for me?
No, Mark, that's pretty much my little rant I want to get on.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Have a good night. It is my intent this week, if I could clear out appointments and meetings and everything we've got going on as we expand the voice of college football, then I would get to all this. If I just focused on this channel would be so much better, but it's not. Anyway, I would like to. My intent every week is to produce Big 10 power rankings, SEC, ACC, Big 12 power rankings, to produce conference championship scenarios in all those conferences, to produce a bottom 10, to produce what else? Various college football playoff models and situations and criteria and what different scenarios are and how they play out for the rest of the season and all sorts of other stuff that I would like to get to. So that's the intent. But we will be back here at 11 a.m. Eastern time with all of you. And we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you for all your contributions. And that should wrap it up for Saturday night show. So God bless all of you, and we will see you back here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time